call up an intermediary, buy the property, technically speaking, it's in an LLC in our name. You can use the $500,000 to do the improvement on the property. The problem, and this has become a problem since COVID, and it's not so much a problem in the rest of the United States, but it's a big problem in New York. You have to spend the money within 180 days to close it. So once you close on the property you're going to fix or improve, you need to make sure that you get that construction done and that you spend that $500,000 within the 180 days. It's very difficult to do in New York. Now, the IRS doesn't know when the property is completed, so you could say to the intermediary, you could say to us, I want you to send the other 500 to the contractor now. That's a little stupid. You run into other problems, right? And the IRS wants it substantially complete, so that's not even technically legal.
Right.
So we used to be able to get construction done in 180 days, especially if you had all your ducks in order, you got your permits. In other words, the seller, you paid the seller got the permits, everything was in order, you close, and you're breaking ground, right? But you know what happens in New York now, you're not getting anything done. So, well, that's not necessarily true, it depends on the extent of what you're doing, but you can do a construction exchange. The direct swaps I talked about before, right? That was the situation I had with John. Pre and post closing. So, suppose I own this property for $1.1 million using Artie's number, and I don't have a mortgage on it. I'm going to walk away from the closing with $1 million in cash. I told you that you need to spend that $4 million in the next closing, right? But suppose I want like $100,000 to go to Croatia. I want $200,000 to do whatever. I want to pay down my mortgage on my primary residence. I want $350,000 in this transaction. I want the money. You can't do it because I got to spend the full $1 million. But what can you do? You get a mortgage now for the $350,000. I take the money, I send it to Croatia, I do whatever I want to do with it, I pay down my other mortgage. Now when I sell in the subsequent transaction, I'm only getting $650, I'm going to invest the $650 plus a new mortgage, right? The money's got to come from someplace. But I managed to get $350,000 cash out of this transaction because I refinanced it prior to the sale. You could do the opposite, by the way. You could buy the new property for $1 million and then refinance that property and pull the $350,000 out, right? That's why we call it pre-closing and post-closing refinancing. It's a very common issue. People want to do it all the time, but watch out.
This is what investors do, like the fix and flips.
If you close for $1 million on a new property, and at the date of the closing, you already have a commitment from the bank to give you $350,000, it's fatal. The IRS is going to take the position that $350,000 is taxable. That's what they're going to say to you. But it's done all the time. So if you know you're going to sell a piece of property with a 1031, and you know you're going to want money out of it, put a mortgage, even if it's a bogus mortgage. Make it a bogus mortgage to your kid. You can do it, right? So you have to put a mortgage on the property and then pay it off at the closing, then you can keep the payoff money. But you can't keep the money if it's going into your pocket under the 1031 transaction. And then the last thing, which is our biggest issue with 1031 now, it's the number one issue that we deal with. John and I, go back to John and I, we own a piece of property together. $2 million 3-family house, it's a rental. He owns 50% tenancy in common, I own 50% tenancy in common. I already told you, he could do a 1031, I could do a 1031, we don't get along anymore. We say, John, let's just sell this thing, we buy our own properties. Or, I say, John, I want to sell this thing, you can do a 1031, I'm taking my money, I'm paying taxes on it. It happens all the time, right? So, it's easy if we're tenants in common, but usually if John and I own a property together, we probably put it into an LLC or a corporation where we're both owners, right? So the IRS is very clear, you cannot do a 1031 transaction, you cannot do a 1031 transaction on a partnership interest. So our partnership, John Evan LLC, can sell for $2 million, and together we can buy another property for $2 million. The LLC can, but we cannot separate. Where he buys, what he does, what he wants to do, and I do what I want to do. What we have to do under those circumstances is what we call a drop and swap. We need to take the piece of real estate, we need to dissolve the LLC, and drop the property 50% into John's name or 50% into my name. Or usually, John will put his into a single member LLC, I would put mine into a single member LLC. It's really the same as me owning my half, John owning his half. And then when we sell, John sells his half as a tenant in common, I sell mine as a tenant in common, and we go our own way. It's called a drop and swap. You can also, by the way, do a swap and then drop, but typically people do a drop and swap. The problem is this: we cannot terminate our tenancy, or dissolve our company now, and then close next month on a property. It's fatal. The IRS says you sold your partnership interest, right? The drop was a sham, it was fake. And it all comes down to intention. So when somebody calls us up and says, we want to go separate ways, we have this property, I say, how do you own it? They go, it's in an LLC, there's two of them, right, or three of them. I go, you can't do it. You have to drop the deed down and then do a swap. And they go, but we're closing Friday. It's not going to work. Because you need time between the drop and the swap, and New York State, now I say New York State because New York State's the one that audits these things, they look at factors, it's all about intention. So if we do the drop today on June 6th, and we sell December 31st, is that enough time? It's not enough time if they show that this property was on the MLS on June 6th. They look at intention. You guys on June 6th, when you dropped the property, even though you didn't close until a year later, that's when you were thinking about selling this property. So they know, they check MLS records. They check the local MLSs. Was the property on the market? What was your intention? So if it wasn't on the MLS, and we did the drop, and then there was an outside reason why we wanted to sell, so the biggest gray area that we have with 1031 exchanges today are people that own a property with somebody, they want to do a drop, and then they want to do a swap, the 1031 swap. That timing element is critical, and just so you know, New York State, it's on their checklist. Was this property part of a partnership? When was it dropped, right? And by the way, they don't look at the deed date, they look at the recording date, because they know that I could record a deed today on June 6th and date it January 1. They don't care what the date on the deed is, they want to know when it was recorded. And we had a case with an attorney in Queens who did a drop and swap for clients for a 1031. The idiot never recorded the deeds. Why didn't you record the deeds? I was going to get to it. What's the rush? Right? I mean, the clients, I didn't want to throw the attorney under the bus. It's actually somebody you guys know.
Name.
But it was just stupid. Just stupid. It wasn't me, by the way. Right? So with these partnership interests, so what I tell people generally, right, is in taxation, when I see two partners owning a piece of property, I say to them, get rid of this partnership. Just get rid of it. Drop the properties down now to the two of you, two different LLCs. Nothing changes except the way that you do your taxes, right? Because if you're going to sell one day, this is going to become a critical issue for you. And 9 out of 10 times when I say that to people,